I'm here in Boston. It's a very beautiful day in a really lovely part of this constituency, and the election's coming up, and I'm talking to people on the street. My name's Alan. What's your name?
Dawn.
Hello, Dawn. So, what are your thoughts about the upcoming election?
I don't really have any opinion. I think that some's got positives, some got negatives, and I think it all is the same. You win on some, you lose on everything, whichever way you vote.
So you're not decided, or you're not going to vote at all?
I'm not going to vote. I don't feel that it'll have any benefit one way or another. Doesn't matter which party gets in, I'll win on from both and I'll lose from everybody.
Do you think that if everyone thinks like that, then things will stay the same? Is your concern that you're not happy about there isn't anything positive, or what is it? Or is something? Do you think you cannot have an influence? What's behind your thinking?
Yeah, I don't think I would have any influence. I think that what will be, and it has to run its natural course. I think that a change needs to happen irrespective whether it's positive or negative. So I think that has to happen in order for change, but it's not today, it's not tomorrow, it's in a couple of years' time where things will count more.
And do you think in this constituency, what do you think the temperature is? Where do you think people will land on July 4th?
I think it might be a different outcome. I think for once it may sway, but...
To who?
I think it'll probably either go more Labour side than it has done traditionally. I don't know if it'll be enough to sway it, but I think that it's possibly more on that side.
Okay, but you don't care either way, whoever it goes to?
No, I think I would have much more of an opinion if you came back in 3 or 4 years' time. I'd have much more of an opinion, but I think that it has to be a natural progression as to what happens over the next few years in order for people's manifests to actually take effect, to be reflected upon.
So just so I'm clear, so nothing on cost of living crisis, nothing on what can be done with infrastructure, health, education, the borders, any of those issues, free speech, net zero, jobs, income, none of those, no one that's in there saying anything that you particularly appealing to?
No, I think they're all saying what they think you want to hear. I think that what has to happen is we've had a Conservative government for a long time, and I think what has to happen now is that possibly change, because obviously everyone's criticising, saying that you've done this, you've said this, and now they're saying something else. Give somebody else an opportunity to see if they can change it, they can't change it. There's been tax rises. I mean, I think we've had the most amount of increase in inflation that we've ever had. I don't necessarily think that all the promises that have been put out there can be altered and can be achieved. So now, okay, I think almost a case of if you think you can do it, crack on and do it, and let's see if you can. And if you can, congratulations. And if you can't, well, then we're back to square one, and then we can all then go back.
All right, thanks for talking to us.
You're welcome.
So I'm here in Boston at Skegness with Richard Tice, who's chairman of the Reform Party. Nice to see you, Richard.
Nice to see you, Alan. It's fantastic. It's a sunny day. It's a very special day, actually. It's Armed Forces Day. We're here at the stunning War Memorial here in the centre of Boston, and there have been events here throughout the day. But we also had, earlier in June, we had the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and the ceremony here was truly amazing. And I met a 100-year-old war veteran who placed his wreath here, and I have to say it's one of the most beautiful war memorials I've ever seen. The plaques of campaigns, of regiments, of individuals. It's truly it's very humbling, actually. It sends a shiver down the spine. It really does. Amongst all the other stuff going on in the world, you know, we must never forget. And Lincolnshire there's so much history, particularly with the RAF. There were about 100 airfields during the Second World War in Lincolnshire, and so there's a tremendous military history and pride and sort of feeling of self-belief amongst veterans, and a real sense that this great nation we're losing that self-belief, we're losing that confidence, and that's what all of this represents, this extraordinary heritage. It's one of the most humbling things. Just also up at Woodall Spa, there's a beautiful memorial there to the RAF, the people from RAF Coningsbury, and it really, do you know, I've rarely felt so touched actually about the history as I've sort of, you know, spent weeks here learning and really enjoying it. Just remarkable.
It's very important, it's very beautiful. Maybe we can get a little look of the monument I mean, I will ask you afterwards why you think it is that we're losing some of that, because it's poignant.
It really is, and I think it's actually about what we're being taught our children in schools, and we're teaching the wrong type of history, and we're teaching that everything's bad and that what we did was bad, whereas actually what we should be teaching is the remarkable achievements typified by these memorials, not just here in Boston, but actually in market towns up and down the length and breadth of the United Kingdom. And that it's just truly extraordinary. It applies here to the Normandy campaign, Dunkirk veterans, Dieppe, just extraordinary. And where I've been staying actually was the home of the Dambuster Squadron in the Second World War. And that, again, there's pictures all on the walls, and it's just very, very special.
And do you think with the British public, that resonates with the British public? Because often we kind of hear from certain people with certain ideas, and they seem to be in many of the institutions, a lot of the media, that type of thing. But what's your take? You've been out canvassing, talking to people. Where do you think that is?
It's so much bigger in the real world, in villages, in market towns, all over our great United Kingdom, than actually that sense of patriotism, of pride. Actually, people of no party or any party, your traditional, old school, socially conservative Labour voter is as patriotic as anybody. And I think actually we should try and put party politics away from that sense and engender a real sense of strength, appreciation, and you know what? I mean, in a dangerous geopolitical world, actually the best way to guarantee peace is to be strong and to prepare for war. That's the reality. Sounds tough to say, but history always shows it.
One of the things that's come up is the question actually of conscription or some kind of national service. Some people might ask, the idea might be an interesting idea, but when people have not promoted the ideas of freedom, liberties, privacy, and as universal principles that are really held, and after the last few years where we've seen a lot of them squandered and suffocated, how that might be hard to convince people to go out and do that. But how do you see that? Because they are important questions.
They are. I think that you can't design such a scheme on the back of a fact packet. And the truth is that our armed forces have been worn down both financially and also motivationally with the quality of the way that our serving personnel are looked after, accommodated, equipped, and the veterans have been abandoned. And so what we've got to do is we've got to invest much more in defence, which is part of what we stand for, and in looking after, as I say, our existing personnel in much better accommodation, properly equipped. But then also we need to be a world leader in having a real department of veterans that treats them as treasured assets, and we should be maximising the use of people who've been in the armed forces, because at the moment, frankly, what's gone on is just laughable. And you compare that to what happens in, for example, the United States. We've got so much opportunity there, and we at Reform are absolutely passionate about that. Nigel's passionate about it. I'm passionate about it. Yeah, we can do this really well. And do you know what? There's a massive appetite for it. And so, yeah, these are some of the things that we've got to do. And that all is about. It's about taking the best of who we are, best of what we have been, and saying, right, now we've got to go for it. We've got to grow it. We've got to maximise it.
We're here in the centre part of town here at Boston, a sort of market town. It's a very beautiful buildings, but tell us a bit about the constituency in this part here.
Yeah, the truth is this is an incredibly historic market town in the heart of Lincolnshire. It's got a huge port, the Port of Boston, that most people have completely forgotten about. And I was there with the management just 2 days ago with Nigel, and what's going on there is, I mean, massive port, but a completely wasted opportunity. Here in the centre of town, there's some, there's some life, but the reality is the quantity of empty shops and the quantity of there's a huge former department store here that's
Let's have a look at it, yeah.
For years and years. And so there's no department store in the centre of town. And people who've lived here all their lives, they just despair at all of the changes, the deprivation, and the fact how this town has gone down. It's a town that, in a sense, it suffered huge change, very significant immigration. It was one of the first towns that changed because of freedom of movement, changes back in the mid-noughties. But actually, it's not unusual now. And the reality is that it's had a very significant impact for a variety of reasons. What a lovely sight.
Yeah.
Look at this. Trotting through carriages. That's very special. I organised this just for you. Are you with us?
Reform! Well, it's interesting because even though it's a beautiful day and they're lovely buildings, we can see there's several of them that are all empty. From where we've just been opposite the square, many of the big buildings are empty. This one that you're talking about and this one. This speaks to one of the questions of like development and productivity, investment in infrastructure, retail. What's reform? What would you do if you've got
so
a
the most
position?
fundamental thing with all of these town centres is business rates and a lack of coordinated management. That falls on the council. The council needs to get together with the major landlords of properties and say we've got to have a proper coordinated plan. The second thing is the business rate scheme is absurd. And our plan is scrap business rates on high streets, for shops and for leisure, for small and medium-sized businesses, replace it with sort of like an online delivery tax, 3 or 4%. That would essentially pay for it. And that would give shops the opportunity, people want to take a bit of risk again, still get a bit of rent for the owners of the buildings, but we've got to regenerate these town centres. And I'm afraid to say that what you're seeing is far too many barber shops opening, and many of those are always empty, and they're actually they're money laundering fronts for the drugs trade, and it's happening all over the country. It's happening here in Boston, it's happening in Skegness, and town after town all over the country. And then you've got candy shops opening up, and this is basically a failure of the authorities, the police and the local authorities, to deal with rampant criminality literally in plain sight on the high street. And then here in Boston we're going to approach Marketplace. You know, it sort of feels okay on, thank you very much for your support, thank you. It feels okay in the sunlight, but you come to the evening here and the number of residents of Boston or nearby villages who say it's dangerous, they won't come here at night, it's just not a safe place to be. And I've been here one night and I have to say there are groups hanging around, drug dealing, looking pretty intimidating, and there's no police to be seen anywhere. And the truth is that the number of properties, houses where I knock on the door and no one speaks a word of English. So just in the last couple of days I knocked on one door, 7 people live there, pretty small property, Bulgarians. 15-year-old lad was the only one who spoke any English. And I said, so why are you living here? And he said, we prefer Bulgaria. And I said, so why are you here? And he said, the money, the benefits is better, that we can send home. I thought, wow. And then a few doors down, on the same street, family of 5. Only one spoke any English whatsoever, and they're here for the benefits. This is a member of NATO, a member of the European Union, whose people are coming to live in the UK to abuse our generosity, to abuse our benefit system. And it's not surprising that long-standing residents, British citizens, are absolutely furious, raging mad. I mean, seriously. And this is just one example. And I tell you, it is that feeling of abuse of our taxpayers' cash, that something is very wrong. And that's why Reform UK is doing well, because we talk about the difficult stuff. And a lot of people might, listening to this, watching this, might say, bit edgy, Tice. But we've got the courage to tell it as it is, because it's taxpayers' cash.
So I was going to ask you about this because like historically, when they'd point at certain people and they say the reason why there's a slump or the reason why we've got problems in resources is because these people are coming over. But the numbers were much smaller historically. And I think just to clarify for the public and your view on this, what's your view about migration generally? Is it that it can be of benefit, but it's just the people on the boats that are problematic? Or how do you see that?
Yeah, it's very simple. So in the last 2 years, we've had a net 1.5 million people arrive. And that is mass immigration of a scale that's never been seen in the United Kingdom before, completely contrary to what the Tory government promised. Our view of immigration is smart immigration is a good thing, and highly skilled, highly qualified. I mean, in the 80s and 90s, we had net immigration running at between 20 and 40,000 a year, so not barely discernible. And guess what? We had high economic growth, we had real wage growth, and young British people were getting up, they were working on the farms, they were working in shops, and work paid, and people were getting more prosperous. But since the advent of freedom of movement of the Eastern EU nations, that's when things changed dramatically, and we were sold a lie. And the truth is that we've seen almost no real wage growth for the last 15 years. So I repeat, smart immigration, and the key to immigration is integration. What doesn't work is mass immigration, where people don't learn the language, and you've got a situation now where on the litter bins here in Boston, they're written in the signage on the litter bin is written in 3 different languages. I'm sorry? You've got polling cards written in different languages. With the greatest of respect, if you want immigration to work, people have got to integrate, got to learn the language. And the idea that British taxpayers should have to waste hundreds of millions of pounds every year to pay for translation services, for people in the NHS, for signs on bins, for voting cards, that doesn't work. And that's not working for the British people. And I'm telling you, they are enraged about it.
So historically, the idea of racism, because this term has been levelled at Reform and different individuals, was about discriminating against people based primarily on their ethnicity, skin colour, or where they're from, just generically saying we don't want those kinds of people, we don't want those here, regardless of the situation, where they came from the Commonwealth or whatever. But what you're saying, just to be clear, is about illegal migrants coming often from Eastern Europe, and is what you're saying.
Actually, to be clear, what I'm saying is actually the legal numbers are a much bigger issue in numerical terms. And look, I repeat, smart immigration is a great thing and has worked very successfully. But no one voted for mass immigration. And what we've not got now is mass legal immigration that no one planned for, that's led to housing rents going up 20+% in a couple of years. Massive pressure on the health service, suppressing the wages of British citizens, putting pressure on other things like dentistry and the like. So, yeah, that's the reality. And so our proposal is to freeze immigration. So about 500,000 people leave the UK every year. So you can welcome 500,000 people who've got the right skills, the right qualifications, including students, and therefore you essentially freeze the population, and that's a good thing. And history shows that works. And we've got to be brave enough to say, well, if it worked then, it can work now. And what we know is, at the moment, mass immigration is making us poorer. We're in the longest recession per person since record began 70 years ago. It's not a coincidence that that's exactly alongside mass immigration. So, and then with regard to the illegal immigration, which is primarily the boats, but not only the boats, the simple solution is that you've got to do a variant of what the Australians did. So we've got to pick up and take back to France. We're legally entitled to do it. We've got to leave the ECHR. I mean, countries like Canada, America, Australia, great nations around the world, Japan, they're not members of the ECHR. And guess what? They're actually doing rather well. They've got their own human rights schemes. They're sovereign, independent, proud, confident nations, and that's what we need. We don't need an overseas court telling us how to run our law. So we've got to leave the ECHR, pick up and take the boats back to France. This whole thing stops within a matter of weeks, and then you've got to process those who come here illegally and remove and deport those who haven't got the right to stay, which is the vast majority of them. So, yeah, I know some people will say, that's nothing to do with racism, right? Let's just remind people, the deputy leader of Reform UK is from an ethnic minority. The other deputy leader of Reform UK is gay. So we've actually probably got the most straight leadership team of, frankly, any political party.
Got the borders coming, boss.
You do not want to see me trying it on a skateboard. That would end badly.
And how are people responding? So these things, because often one of the things is, it perhaps, it's a question I've got, because obviously the current incumbent government has said various things about what they're going to do, but it does seem that in the civil service and other institutions, people are actually working against them. So even if you get a bit of a democratic mandate to do something, we've got some issues in our institutions, haven't we?
The truth is, Britain is broken. And this marketplace, the centre of Boston, typifies that broken mentality. You've got, one of the prime shops here, just there, empty. You've got another prime shop right on the corner here, empty. Had a huge barber sign until that was taken down just the other day. Lots of other empty shops. So Britain is broken. We've got to reform our economy. We say that you've got to make work pay by lifting the starting point at which you pay any income tax to £20,000. That helps the least well off, the lowest paid, and those on benefits the most. That's the whole point. We are the real party, the workers now, and we're focused on making conditions better for working folk in the UK. We've got to have an ambition of getting to zero waiting lists on healthcare. It's the first election, actually, where we have a proper debate about the woeful healthcare outcomes in the UK. We've got proper plans for that. We've got to be smart about immigration by freezing it, higher quality, higher skills, and you've got to train our own people. And then law and order. We need 30, 40,000 more officers on the streets over the next few years with proper deterrent, proper stop and search. There's a direct link between the massive 2/3 decline in stop and search and the trebling of knife crime in much of the UK in the last 5 to 10 years or so. So look, these are things actually, most of which are not rocket science, but can be done, but require courageous leadership, bold leadership, conviction. And that's the difference. And that's why we're going up in the polls. And for those who say, oh, these are a dreadful bunch of people, well, let's just think. I mean, we're polling 20%, 21% in some polls. We're ahead of the Tories. That's really saying, so if you're saying that, are you saying all of those voters are dreadful, bigoted people? Or are you saying, actually, they're onto something? British people many people are pretty angry about what's going on.
Well, so on that point, we've seen in the last few days, we've seen a Channel 4 News piece that looks like it's had an actor in it and a production company. I'm not sure of all the nuances. I'm sure you know the details much more. And Question Time, a lot of people we've been speaking to on the street have sort of raised concerns about how things look very biased and look like they're in an echo chamber. So obviously there's a kind of sense of a media worldview and a kind of Westminster worldview, but then when you get out to the public, the great British public, things are different. How are you finding out here, and how are you seeing the landscape? What's happening when you're knocking on the door?
So knocking on doors today has been one of the best days in the campaign so far, and everybody, bar none, has said that was a complete stitch up on Channel 4. They knew that no one normal speaks in that horrific way, and it turns out that the gentleman in question, Mr. Parker, he lied about his profession. He said he was a property developer. Actually, he's got a website that shows that he's an actor, and when you drill a bit further down into that actor, what's his speciality? Secret filming. And what's his other speciality? Although he claims to be well spoken, his other speciality is rough voices. So why would you use your rough voice in a normal day-to-day job on a Saturday morning? That seems a bit weird to me. Why wouldn't you just use your normal voice, unless you're actually acting? And of course, what is acting? Acting it's make-believe. It's essentially it's purveying a fantasy. It's making stuff up to suit a script, to suit a story, and that's fine when you're watching a drama series or a film. But this was actually really serious. This was making very, very serious, defamatory, libelous allegations against Reform UK, and the truth is that Channel 4 are guilty of election interference. They've broken electoral law. The matter is in the hands of lawyers. It'll be reported to the police. I've no doubt whatsoever that this was a complete stitch-up, and on the doors people see it for what it is, and people know that this has been completely wrong. Bizarrely, although we were furious about it, and it's very uncomfortable to have these allegations thrown at one, actually, do you know what? It might actually work in our favour, because people realise that the establishment is so terrified of our progress, they will now do whatever they can. And then you saw BBC Question Time with the audience, and it turns out a number of members who asked questions, they weren't just random members of the population. No, they were people who had a track record with the BBC or a track record with extreme pro-Palestine groups, and this is all now out there. So once again, the BBC has been caught out trying to stitch up a whole debate, and it's unbelievable, but I think it'll work in our favour.
Why do you think it is? Because we're very in favour of everyone talking and actually thrashing out the ideas calmly, civilly, rationally, and working out where we get to things. I mean, we just interviewed a young couple. It was really lovely. She really likes reform. He's saying he's going to vote for Labour. They were together. They weren't screaming at each other. It was, it was really nice to see a grown-up kind of reflection on things. We've got common values. We're citizens together. And what's happened, Richard? Why do you think there's this level of sort of
division and
shrill kind of
I'll
smearing
why,
and not discussing the virtue of the ideas?
Because people are getting poorer and their quality of life is reducing. It is as simple as that. If people were getting more prosperous, if life was getting better, as it was in the 80s and 90s, and indeed the noughties, guess what? Politics was in a very, very different place. Still combative, but nothing like as brutal and divisive. And the other element, of course, is the power of social media, which is also a complete sewer. So I think those are the primary reasons. And look, we'd love respectful debate. I had a really detailed, robust but respectful debate on immigration with the Telegraph podcast and with Jonathan Porters the other week for I think almost an hour. So you can do it, but it requires time and consideration as opposed to short-term squeals. But
well, I suppose the thing I was saying is that much of the public generally are very into discussing, being respectful, listening. But what happens is often the kind of shrill elements are in bits of the media and are kind of almost like you can't say that. But rather than exploring these issues, but it's good to hear that you've had some of that, but rather than exploring these issues, people are sort of called names. And I think that's certainly when we're talking to people here, that's a kind of like reaction that people have had. They're kind of fed up with just having that kind of thing put to them.
The market's move has now essentially turned, and people are sick of the name calling, sick of being smeared and labelled, and sick of basically debate being suppressed. And that's what Westminster and the mainstream media have tried to do. They've basically tried to suppress debate. You're not allowed to say it, you're not allowed to think it, and therefore their worldview will prevail. And it's a form of dictatorship that has tried to be imposed on people, whether it's about immigration or whether it's on the trans debate or whether it's on net zero. On these three things, we at Reform UK have a very different position from the mainstream parties. We believe ours is the common sense position. And let me tell you, at campaign events, when I say that all of this gender ideology should be banned from our primary and secondary schools, it gets the biggest roar of applause from parents and grandparents of anything. When I say we're a nation that's founded and should be very proud of our Christianity heritage, again, massive roar. We can welcome all faiths or no faiths, but people must respect and embrace and understand and empathise with that heritage. And these are things that people have sort of been fearful of saying. Well, we're in Reform, we're not fearful. We take a bit of flack for it, but that's what debate is all about. And likewise on net zero. We're the only people standing against the lunacy of the job-destroying, industry-killing net zero. And it's really now, the penny is dropping. In this constituency, it's net zero is going to mean hundreds of massive 50-metre pylons blighting the countryside. People are steaming mad. The Conservative MP voted for net zero, but now claims he's against the pylons. Well, the pylons are a direct result of net zero. So, frankly, he's got no position to stand on. So we're very clear on this stuff, and the penny is dropping, and people are very grateful. And I respect those who have a different view, but democracy is much better if you have healthy debate, different views, and perhaps a different electoral system where compromise is more more likely to happen if you have proportional representation.
So we've got 5 pledges together that we put to everyone, and we've covered most of them in this conversation, and we've seen what you've said about the WHO, the World Health Organization, and about sovereignty in the UK, making decisions, freedom of speech and other items that are really important. I suppose one of the questions to finish on is it seems no one really wants to talk about what happened in the last few years in the election. The mainstream parties, particularly about lockdowns, it's kind of been, in spite of the WHO, it was actually the Public Health Act that was used to force lockdowns, and then we had a vaccine mandate, even when people we lost a lot of care workers, and then we nearly lost a lot of healthcare workers as well, and people stood up and fought against it, and you were one of the people and others that actually challenged it as well at that time. Where would you stand on those things now moving forwards? Because that will be something that will be, people will say one thing and then they get into a position of influence, and then maybe next time round they get into a position of power and everything changes. So just how do you see that?
We're increasingly robust on this stuff. We were the only party that was anti-lockdown. We took a lot of abuse for it at the time, and we're very clear in our contract instead of a manifesto that bluntly we should leave the WHO unless there's major funding and structural reform, which frankly there won't be. And we're no truck or interest in the World Economic Forum. And look, with regard to vaccine mandates, there's a whole load of nonsense talked out there. We always believed in, look, it's your own individual choice. If you want to take it, great. I took it. I was 58 or 57 at the time. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't need to. I was very anxious about my youngsters taking it. They did, for basically travel reasons. But, we stood against children being forced into having vaccinations, and we took a lot of flack for that. But now we're the only party that's calling for an inquiry in our contract into the excess deaths and also into vaccine harms. And the two are clearly related. There are multiple reasons for the excess deaths, whether it's ambulance delays, A&E delays, cancer delays, heart disease delays, all this stuff. There's a whole bunch of reasons, but no one else wants to talk about it. And why? Because the greatest religion we have in this country is the NHS. And if you talk about that stuff, it's an indication that actually the NHS is not fit for purpose. And we've got to be brave enough. You can only learn the lessons of long distant past or recent past if you're prepared to say, do you know what, we've got some things right, we've got some things wrong, and where you screw it up, you've got to be willing to learn from your mistakes. Admit it, don't cover it up, learn from it, and try not to make the same mistake again. It's what we do in the world of business, and it's what the public sector should do. It's what Westminster should do. And I think actually the public would much prefer that, to say, politician says, look, we had this strong view, we got this right and we got that wrong, we're sorry about this, we're learning from it, we're changing course on this. And if they'd done that with lockdowns, for example, if they said the first 3 or 4 weeks, 5-6 weeks, we didn't really know what on earth was going on, so we took a cautious view. And then actually we were prepared to look at the lessons from places like Sweden, from Florida, and there's different ways of doing things. That would have been a smart thing to do. If you'd been honest with the public and saying, frankly folks, we're all learning on the job here, as opposed to what the message, if you remember, the message was, we're taking the best advice from the best scientists and the best experts, and we're making the right decisions at the right time. And it turned out, when we saw the evidence from things like the lockdown files, the WhatsApp messages, that actually a lot of it was complete bunkum. But they were just deliberately knowingly misleading the British public, creating a sense of fear, to trample us down. And that's a terrible indictment of what went on. And it's affecting us in health terms, in educational development of young people, as well as financially. So yeah, this stuff is really serious.
Okay, Richard, well, thank you for talking to us. You've only got a few days left, so it's important that you go out with your questions that we've got, the 5 pledges. Tell your candidates that your vote's going to depend on that. And we've gone out to everyone to ask them to speak to us, but Richard's come to meet with us. Thanks very much for meeting with us, Richard.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.